Shattered glass, when darkness hides in plain sight. Check out my new story about honor, betrayal, and justice. I think you'll enjoy it. If you do, please like and subscribe. Chapter I: The Surface Cracks. My name is David Stone. I'm 42 and used to be in the military special forces. 5 years ago, I quit that life and became an art restorer, fulfilling my mother's dream for me. My wife, Vanessa, is 35 and works with art galleries. At least that's what she told me. I thought I knew who she was. I was wrong. Our perfect life together started to fall apart when I bought 6 ordinary paintings from a flea market. Now I know something terrible. The worst truths often hide under a thin coat of paint, and once you see them, you can never unsee them. 1. Trying to start over. I was carefully applying cleaning solution to a small area of an old painting. I moved slowly and precisely, the same way I once handled weapons. Whether you're cleaning a gun or restoring art, you need the same kind of focus. The painting showed a bowl of fruit. The paint had cracked in places, creating a web of tiny lines across the surface. To me, these cracks were like a map. They told a story about the painting's history. After 5 years of restoration work, I'd learned to read these stories. Suddenly, a metal can fell in my workshop. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Without thinking, I dropped to the floor and reached for a gun that wasn't there. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel adrenaline flooding my system. Afghanistan, 2018. A village street after a firefight, then a noise behind me. No, stop. I'm in my workshop in Portland. It's 2025. There are no enemies here. Breathe, David. Count backward. 10, 9, 8. My voice sounded rough in the empty room. I got up slowly and picked up the fallen can. It had been knocked over by a breeze from the window. Such a simple explanation for my extreme reaction. Dr. Jensen, my therapist, calls this a combat flashback. 2 therapy sessions every week for 3 years, and I still jump at loud noises. I checked the time, 6:45 p.m. Vanessa was supposed to be home from a charity event by 7. She told me she consulted for art galleries. That's what our tax form said too. At 7:10, I heard her key in the lock. Vanessa walked in smelling of expensive perfume. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her green eyes seemed especially bright. Sorry I'm late. The charity auction went on forever. Rich people take their time deciding to donate. She kissed my cheek. Her lips felt cold. Did they raise much? I watched her face carefully. Small expressions can reveal more than words. Enough to fund the new children's wing at the art museum. Vanessa put her purse down very carefully. Too carefully, not with her usual casualness. What's for dinner? I'm not hungry, I said, noticing how her mouth tightened slightly. But I can heat up some pasta for you. Don't bother. There was food at the event. She walked into the living room without taking off her high heels. That wasn't like her. She always took her shoes off at the door. I went back to my work, but I could hear her talking quietly on the phone in our bedroom. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone was cold and businesslike. Not how people usually talk about charity events. 5 years ago, when I left the military and started training as an art restorer, Vanessa seemed like my saving grace. She came into my life when my nightmares were at their worst and offered me a chance at a normal future. I clung to her like I was drowning and she was my only hope. But in the last few months, something had changed. Small cracks were appearing in our marriage, like in the old paintings I restored. And as a restorer, I couldn't help but notice them. The next morning I woke up at 5:00 a.m. as usual. Vanessa was still asleep, lying straight and stiff. Even in sleep, she maintained perfect posture. I put on my running shoes and went for a jog. It was Saturday, which meant the flea market would be open. My mother used to take me there every Saturday when I was a kid. You can find art in unexpected places, Davy, she would say, looking through old frames and faded paintings. She was the first one to notice I had artistic talent. She enrolled me in art classes, but I dropped out. I was looking for more excitement. When I came home from my third deployment to attend her funeral, I found a childhood drawing I'd made of her, framed and kept among her most precious belongings. On the back she had written, "My son sees what others miss." That day I promised myself I would honor her wish. Maybe it was late, but I would become what she wanted me to be, someone who brings beauty back to damaged things. The flea market was busy that Saturday morning. I moved through the crowd, carefully scanning the merchandise. It was a useful habit from my military days. I noticed details that didn't fit. "Hey there, soldier," called a rough voice. I turned and saw an old man with wild gray hair and beard. He stood behind a wobbly table covered with junk. "Yes, you. I can spot military a mile away. Vietnam myself." I walked over. The old man held out a wrinkled hand. "Henry Thompson. I collect odds and ends. Some call me a hoarder." "David Stone," I replied, shaking his hand. "How did you know I was military?" "People who have seen real fighting carry it in their eyes," Henry said. "But you're into art now. I see paint under your fingernails." "I restore paintings," I nodded. "I fix what others made." "Then I've got something for you." The old man reached under his table and pulled out a cardboard box. 6 paintings by some unknown artist. Got them from an estate sale in the suburbs. Nothing special, but good for practice. And cheap, too. I carefully took out one painting, a mediocre landscape. The artist had been confident but not very skilled. The other 5 were similar nature scenes, street views, nothing remarkable. "How much?" I asked. "For you, military man. $100 for all of them. Consider it a thank you for your service." "They're worth more than that," I said, feeling uncomfortable. I like fair deals. Henry waved his hand. "I need the space. You need the practice. Take them." I went home with the box under my arm. There was a note from Vanessa on the kitchen table saying she'd gone away for the weekend with friends. This wasn't the first time she'd made sudden plans. I took the paintings to my workshop and began examining them carefully. Something felt off about them. My instincts, sharpened by years of military service, were rarely wrong. I checked the edges of the canvases, the frames, the mounting. The technical details showed something strange. The paintings looked older than they really were. Someone had artificially aged them using professional techniques. Why would anyone make new paintings look old? Only if they were hiding something underneath the top layer. 2. Finding what's hidden. I placed all 6 paintings on my long work table and turned on my special lights that mimic natural daylight. Under these lights, the colors looked more vivid and I could see the texture of the canvas better. I put on my magnifying glasses and started a thorough examination. I spotted the first sign of forgery almost immediately. The cracks in the paint were the wrong age for when the painting was supposedly created. They had been made artificially using a special compound. This was a basic trick used to make things look antique. On the third painting, a countryside scene, I noticed an area with unusual texture. In the bottom right corner, the brushstrokes didn't match the rest of the painting, as if the artist had tried to cover up something underneath. I carefully applied a few drops of special solvent to the edge of this area. The reaction was immediate. The top layer of paint began to dissolve, revealing different colors beneath. "Got you," I muttered, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline I used to get during reconnaissance missions. For the next 3 hours, I worked with total concentration, methodically removing the top layer from a small section of the painting. This work required extreme precision. If I used too much solvent, I could damage what was underneath. Every movement had to be perfect. When I finished cleaning an area the size of a postage stamp, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Under the ordinary landscape, parts of another image were appearing, a woman's body in a suggestive pose. And even though I'd only uncovered a tiny area, I instantly recognized who it was. My heart started racing. I stepped back, took off my glasses, and rubbed my eyes. It couldn't be. But when I looked again at the cleared area, there was no doubt that curve of the hip, that small birthmark. It was Vanessa, my wife. With a sudden urgency, I went back to work, expanding the cleared area. I used stronger solvent, risking damage to the lower layer. I needed to see more, to confirm this wasn't just my imagination. By midnight, I had cleaned half of the first painting, and I had no more doubts. It showed Vanessa naked, posed in a way that might be considered erotic if not for the strange, cold staging. Her expression was a mix of professional detachment and something else. Predatory, calculating. I started on the second painting, working faster now. I knew exactly what I was looking for and which techniques to use. By 2 in the morning, half of the second painting revealed an even more explicit scene, Vanessa with an older, silver-haired man. His face was in profile, but I could sense his authority and cold arrogance. The third painting took less than an hour to process. I was working mechanically now, with the efficiency I'd learned in the military. Another scene, another pose, the same man. But now there was a third person, a young woman, almost a girl with fear in her eyes. By dawn, I had processed all 6 paintings. The scenes became more disturbing with each one. The last painting showed what looked like an inspection, Vanessa, and the silver-haired man examining naked young women lined up like products. In the corner of the room, observers watched from the shadows, their faces hidden but their postures showing eager interest. I sat surrounded by these paintings, feeling physically sick. My wife, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, her life was completely unknown to me. I heard a key in the lock. Vanessa was back earlier than expected. I quickly hid the paintings under a canvas cloth, cleaned the chemicals from my hands, and took a deep breath, preparing to act like nothing was wrong. 3. Starting to investigate. I didn't sleep that night. Vanessa was breathing evenly in our bedroom while I sat in the kitchen, studying the images like I used to study intelligence reports before a mission. I methodically laid out photographs I'd taken of all 6 clean paintings and noted every detail. The settings, luxurious, tastefully decorated rooms. European style, from what I could tell. On one wall hung a painting I recognized, a work by a French artist currently in a private collection in Milan. Vanessa's jewelry, different in each painting, all expensive. Some pieces I'd never seen before, though I thought I knew everything in her jewelry box. The silver-haired man, around 55, with a distinctive scar on his left wrist and a signet ring on his right pinky finger. His posture suggested military training or aristocratic upbringing. The young women, various ages from teenagers to mid-20s, different ethnicities but mostly Eastern European in appearance. One detail was consistent. Their eyes showed fear or emptiness, not the look of professional models. Around 7 in the morning, I heard Vanessa getting up. I quickly gathered all my evidence and hid it in a waterproof case I use for valuable documents. I placed the case under a loose floorboard in my workshop, a hiding place I'd created during my first months back from deployment, when paranoia was my constant companion. By the time Vanessa came into the kitchen, I was making coffee like any normal Sunday. "You're up early," she noted, taking a cup from me. "Couldn't sleep." "Working late," I shrugged. "How were your friends?" "Oh, you know Jennifer," she waved her hand dismissively. "Spent the whole time talking about her divorce. So boring." I nodded, watching her drink her coffee. Her nails were perfectly manicured, no sign that she'd spent the weekend at a lake house as she claimed. No dirt under her nails, no chips in the polish. Too perfect. "I have a spa appointment today," Vanessa said, finishing her coffee. "I'll be back this evening." "Okay," I kissed her cheek, noticing her perfume, not the one she usually wore at home. "I'll be in my workshop." After she left, I waited 15 minutes, watching the clock. Then I put on latex gloves from my restoration kit. Every move I made was deliberate and carefully thought out. I started searching in her walk-in closet, methodically checking every drawer and shelf. I found nothing unusual until I reached the back corner, where I discovered a nearly invisible panel in the wall. My carpentry skills, developed while setting up my workshop, told me this wasn't standard construction. After a few minutes of careful examination, the panel moved, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside were 3 phones, stacks of cash in various currencies, and an ID card for Elizabeth Winters with Vanessa's photo but different hair and makeup. I photographed everything, then carefully removed the phones. 2 were basic burner phones, the kind used for anonymous communications. The third was a high-end smartphone with biometric security. Using a SIM card cloning device I'd kept from my military days, I copied the data from the basic phones. I tried to access the smartphone but couldn't bypass the fingerprint lock. I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it and closed the hidden panel. Vanessa was very observant. Even the slightest change might alert her. Next, I checked her laptop. It was password protected, but after several attempts, I figured it out. Vanessa had used our anniversary date but replaced some digits with special characters. Sentimental, or just easy to remember. The laptop contained encrypted folders. Most were protected better than many military systems I'd encountered. However, in the browser history, I found frequent visits to a website called Artemis Studio with an unusual login system. I copied everything I could onto an encrypted flash drive, then methodically returned the laptop to its original state. I closed the same programs that had been open, moved the cursor back to the same position, even wiped the keyboard to remove evidence of my use. Finally, I examined her car in the garage. Under the front seat, I found another phone, a normal-looking smartphone but with unusually strong security features. In the glove compartment were a fake driver's license in the name Jennifer Parker and a parking ticket from an underground garage in a part of town Vanessa never mentioned visiting. I photographed these items, put everything back exactly as I found it, and left through the back door. The first rule of surveillance: never let your target know they're being watched. 4. My wife's secret life. The next morning I began surveillance. This was familiar territory. My military training included urban observation techniques. Of course, usually I was tracking terrorists, not my own wife. Vanessa left the house at 9:30, dressed in a professional business suit, not the casual outfit she usually wore to gallery meetings. I followed at a safe distance, observing basic surveillance rules. Keep your distance, change positions regularly, avoid direct eye contact. She drove to an upscale neighborhood and parked near a modern building made of glass and concrete. The sign on the front read, Artemis Studio, exclusive photography and fine art. The same name I'd seen in her browser history. I found a cafe across the street, ordered coffee, and pretended to work on a tablet. Actually, I was using a directional microphone and lip-reading software to gather information about the studio's visitors. After watching for 3 hours, I noticed a pattern. Young women entered with companions but either left with different people or didn't come out at all. Men in expensive suits made brief visits, often carrying briefcases, and left looking satisfied. It was the classic setup of a front operation, except what they were selling wasn't typical merchandise. Around 2:00 p.m., a black SUV with dark windows pulled up to the building. 2 muscular men with military bearing, clearly ex-special forces or security professionals, got out and positioned themselves at the entrance. High-level security. At 6:45 p.m., Vanessa finally left the building. She looked different. Her hair was styled more severely, her walk was harder and more confident. Even her posture had changed. Gone was the graceful elegance I was used to, replaced by cold authority. It was like she had taken off one mask and put on another. She walked 2 blocks and stopped at a bus stop where a young woman was waiting nervously. The girl had a small-town look, cheap clothes, uncertain posture, wide eyes taking in the city sights. "You must be Kelly," I heard Vanessa say through my directional microphone. Her voice had changed, warmer now, with concerned undertones. "I'm Elizabeth from the agency. We spoke on the phone about the modeling opportunity." The girl nodded eagerly, clearly relieved. "Yes, thank you for meeting me. I was so afraid I'd get lost in this big city." "No need to worry, dear." Vanessa Elizabeth gently took her arm. "Our studio specializes in finding new talent from small towns. You have exactly the fresh look our clients are searching for." They walked toward the Artemis studio. I followed at a distance, taking photos of their interaction with a mini camera disguised as a button on my jacket. "What kind of photo shoot will it be?" the girl asked, sounding slightly worried. "An exclusive art project for a European magazine," Vanessa answered confidently. "Nothing inappropriate, pure artistic expression. And the pay is excellent, $5,000 for one day's work." The girl's eyes widened. "5,000, really?" "Absolutely. Our clients value natural beauty and pay premium rates." Vanessa smiled so warmly and sincerely that I almost believed her myself. They reached the studio building where the security guards greeted them. I took final photos, including the license plates of all nearby cars, then left. I had enough information for one day. That evening, sitting in a quiet bar a few blocks from our house, I reviewed everything I'd collected. Vanessa wasn't just posing for these disturbing paintings. She was actively recruiting other women. The Artemis studio was clearly a front for something much darker. I remembered the last painting I'd uncovered, the one showing women lined up for inspection. This wasn't artistic fiction. It was a record of human trafficking. 5. How deep it goes. Over the next week, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the loving husband working in my restoration studio. At night, I was an investigator documenting my wife's every move. I installed tiny cameras in our house, well hidden so Vanessa wouldn't find them. I put microphones in ordinary household items, a desk lamp, the kitchen clock, even our wedding photo frame. The irony was painful. By the third day of watching, I noticed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Vanessa stayed at the studio until late evening. The building's lighting changed during these hours. Instead of regular office lighting, there was dimmer, directional lighting typical of photography studios. I decided to dig deeper into their digital presence. The Artemis Studio website looked like any upscale photography studio: minimalist design, sample works, service list. Nothing suspicious on the surface. However, using hacking tools I'd kept from my special operations training, I discovered a poorly secured administrative section. After 3 hours of coding work, I gained access to a hidden part of the site, protected from ordinary visitors. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Their model catalog contained hundreds of profiles of young women, complete with photos, detailed body measurements, and a strange coding system for categories of suitability. Each profile had a status: in preparation, ready for transport, delivered, or terminated. I cross-checked these faces against missing persons databases available to the public. The results were shocking. Over 60% of these models were listed as missing in various states. For most of them, active searches had been abandoned long ago. On Thursday, I took a risk and moved to active surveillance. While Vanessa spent the evening at the studio, I broke into a neighboring restaurant closed for renovations and set up a directional microphone on the roof. This technology could pick up conversations through glass windows from up to 100 meters away. Most of what I heard was ordinary office talk, but around 9 in the evening, I captured a conversation that made my blood run cold. "This merchandise is exceptional quality, Victor." Vanessa's voice was all business. Fresh batch from Eastern Europe, documentation is perfect, backstories are solid. My client in the Middle East won't be happy about the delay, replied a male voice with a slight accent. He specifically requested blonde, blue-eyed merchandise for his collection. Transportation through regular channels is too risky right now. After what happened in Boston, federal agents are increasing inspections. We're using the sea route. The shipment will reach Dubai in 3 days. Make sure they arrive in perfect condition. The last delivery had damage, bruises, signs of resistance. That's unacceptable for clients at this level. I personally oversee pre-transport conditioning. Vanessa's voice turned ice cold. No damage, complete compliance. They'll be like perfect dolls. I recorded the conversation, then photographed the man as he left the building, silver hair, expensive suit, military bearing. He was the same man from the paintings with Vanessa. Back home, I ran facial recognition software on the photo. After an hour, I got a match. Victor Crane, a well-known art dealer specializing in contemporary works. Belgian citizen, educated at prestigious European universities, homes in multiple countries. His reputation in the art world was spotless, and he supported numerous charities. Perfect cover for someone trafficking human beings. 6. The system is corrupt. The next day, I followed a van with an Elite Cleaning Services logo that regularly left from the studio's rear entrance. It drove through the suburbs to a private airfield surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. I parked on a hill overlooking the runway and used night vision binoculars to watch as young women were led from the van. They moved robotically, as if drugged, probably sedated for transport. They were loaded onto a small private plane with no identifying markings. I recorded the registration number and later traced it through a contact in air traffic control who owed me a favor. In the past month, this plane had made regular flights to Dubai, Berlin, and Singapore. The picture was becoming clear and horrifying. Artemis Studio was just a front for an international human trafficking operation. Young women were lured in with promises of modeling careers, then sold to wealthy clients worldwide. I knew I needed to involve official authorities. No matter my skills, I couldn't take down an international criminal network alone. I needed federal help. I spent 2 nights preparing an anonymous evidence package for the FBI. I included photos, conversation recordings, transportation routes, screenshots from the catalog, all carefully documented and organized. I didn't mention Vanessa or my connection to the case. I wanted an objective investigation. I planned to deliver the information directly to the Human Trafficking Task Force, led by Agent Williams. His reputation as a fighter against modern slavery was well established, at least according to news reports. Before sending anything, I decided to review all the paintings that had started this investigation. On the last one, showing the inspection scene, I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner of the luxurious room was a large mirror in an ornate frame. It reflected not only the women and the auctioneer, but also some of the observers standing in the shadows. One of them had partially turned toward the light, enough for the artist to capture his profile. I enlarged this section of the photo and enhanced the image. The face became clearer. The shock felt like a physical blow. I recognized him immediately. It was Agent Williams, the head of the FBI Human Trafficking Task Force, the very person I planned to send my evidence to. We had met at a charity event last year, a fundraiser for victims of violence. Vanessa had insisted we attend. Now I understood why. The system was corrupted at the highest levels. Going through official channels wouldn't just fail, it would put me in direct danger. They would identify me and silence me. I put away the evidence package I'd prepared and realized I would have to act alone. I remembered what my commander used to say: if you can't work within the system, work outside it. The war had begun. My first move wasn't to attack, but to make them think they were safe. Let them believe the evidence was gone and the danger had passed. Meanwhile, I would get closer. I looked at the paintings spread out on my table. 6 ordinary landscapes hiding a nightmare beneath. It was time to lose them, to make my enemies lower their guard. When they relaxed, thinking all evidence was gone, I would strike. War never changes, I thought as I went back to planning. Only the battlefields do. Chapter II, Following the Trail. The first rule of war: to defeat your enemy, make them think you're retreating. Vanessa and her associates needed to believe their secret was still safe. I wanted them to think I was clueless while I tightened the noose. I had to be quick, methodical, and emotionless, like in Iraq when our 6-person team tracked a terrorist cell. But now I was working alone, and the enemy lived in my own house. 1. Creating a fake break-in. It took me 36 hours to plan the operation. I developed a scheme to rob my own workshop with the same attention to detail I once used for combat missions. Every aspect had to look convincing to Vanessa, to the police, and to anyone watching from Artemis Studio. The security system in my workshop was my own creation: 6 motion sensors connected to a central control panel. Alarms would automatically alert my phone and the local police station. The average police response time was 8.5 minutes. I chose the perfect timing: Tuesday, 2:15 a.m. According to local crime statistics, during this time the nearest patrol was usually handling incidents in the shopping district on the north side of town. At 1:30 a.m., I carefully removed all 6 paintings from their hiding place under the floorboard and transported them to a storage unit I'd rented 3 blocks away. Then I returned by an indirect route, constantly checking for anyone following me. At 2:10 a.m., I put on latex gloves and started creating my crime scene. I knocked over a shelf of tools, making noise, but not in a random way. I broke a window from the inside so the glass would fall correctly. I broke into my own safe. I knew how to make it look real without causing unnecessary damage. At 2:17 a.m., I disabled the cameras for 30 seconds, a technical glitch that happens occasionally. During this time, I quickly changed into dark clothing and left through the back door, which isn't visible from the street. At 2:18 a.m., I remotely activated the alarm. The siren cut through the night silence. By the time police arrived exactly 9 minutes later, I was back home, showered, and in bed. The phone rang as expected. I answered with a sleepy, concerned voice, perfectly imitating someone woken in the middle of the night. "Mr. Stone, this is Officer Patterson from the precinct. The alarm at your workshop has been triggered." "What? But I left there just 3 hours ago. Everything was fine." "You need to come down, sir. It looks like a break-in." I woke Vanessa and told her about the call. Her reaction was perfect: concern, worry, and offer to come with me. But I noticed a tiny change in her pupils, a slight narrowing when I mentioned the workshop. That was adrenaline, not fear. "Better stay here," I said. "It might be nothing. I don't want you driving across town at this hour for no reason." "Are you sure?" Her voice had just the right amount of concern. "Absolutely. I'll call if it's anything serious." While getting dressed, I saw her take out a phone, not her regular one. She sent a quick message, then deleted it immediately. The first alarm signal had been sent. At the workshop, 2 patrol officers and a detective were waiting, standard procedure for break-in reports. I played the shocked victim, examining the ransacked space I had created myself. "Can you tell what's missing?" asked Detective Morgan, a heavy-set man with tired eyes. I slowly looked around the workshop, then stopped at the empty wall where the 6 paintings had hung. "The Thompson collection, 6 paintings I was restoring," I put genuine regret in my voice. "They're gone." "Were they valuable?" "Not really. Works by an unknown artist. I bought them at a flea market for practice, but I had spent weeks restoring them. I shook my head. Strange they only took those and not the antique tools. Those are worth much more. The detective made a note. Thieves often don't know the value of what they're stealing. They probably thought paintings must be worth something. An hour later, all the paperwork was done. I signed a statement listing only the 6 paintings as stolen. The detective promised to keep me informed, but we both knew these kinds of petty thefts rarely get solved. When I got home, I found Vanessa in the kitchen. She was making coffee at 4 in the morning, unusual for someone who normally sleeps until 8. "What happened?" she asked, handing me a cup. "Someone stole those paintings from the flea market. Remember I mentioned them. Not a big loss." She nodded with exactly the right amount of sympathy. "I'm sorry about your work, but it wasn't a client's piece, right? Just a personal project." "Yes, nothing important." I shrugged and noticed how she subtly relaxed. Back in bed, I pretended to fall asleep. Through barely open eyes, I watched Vanessa quietly get up and leave the bedroom with her phone. Through the microphone hidden in a vase in the hallway, I heard her whisper, "Yes, definitely those paintings. I'm certain he doesn't suspect anything. Just coincidence. No, I'll check again, but he knows nothing about the studio. Yes, tomorrow as usual." The trap was set. Now they would think the evidence was gone, and I was just an oblivious husband who noticed nothing. Perfect cover for what I planned next. 2. Building my case. The next day I set up an operations center in the storage unit. It was perfect, a former art supply warehouse in an industrial area, with concrete walls that blocked sound and few windows. The owner, an old Vietnamese man, accepted cash and asked no questions. First, I secured the perimeter, installing motion sensors disguised as light fixtures and a separate surveillance system that sent encrypted feeds to my phone. Then I organized my evidence. On the north wall, I created an analysis board, maps of the city marked with Vanessa's regular routes, photos of key people, Victor Crane, Agent Williams, security guards, diagrams of Artemis Studio and its connections. The east wall held the paintings, all 6 now completely cleaned, showing their true content. I organized information from each painting, noting details that might indicate locations, participants, dates. In the center of the room, I set up a computer station, 3 monitors connected to a secure server. I used routing techniques from my military days to make my digital activities untraceable. For the next 3 days, I watched the movements of what I called transporters, the people moving women between different locations. They used different vehicles each time, from ordinary sedans to vans with fake company logos. I created a database of their routes and identified patterns. They never used the same path twice, but always followed certain rules, avoiding streets with surveillance cameras, preferring industrial areas, moving during times with the least traffic. This wasn't just a criminal gang. It was a militarized operation with clear hierarchy and security procedures. Professionals. On the 4th day, I took a bigger risk. While Vanessa was deeply asleep, I had added mild sleeping pills to her evening tea. I used her finger to unlock her smartphone. The database I found was horrifying. Vanessa kept detailed records of every woman processed through their network. The information was organized by categories. Class A, elite models for high-profile clients. Selling price from $300,000. Class B, standard exhibits for private collections. Price $150,000 to $50,000. Class C, bulk merchandise for establishments in developing countries. Price $50,000 $100,000. Each entry included photographs, physical measurements, distinguishing features, psychological profile, and trainability rating. Some entries had a note saying suitable for final performance, a term I didn't understand yet, but it sounded ominous. I copied all the information, carefully erased evidence of my access, and put the phone back. Vanessa didn't stir. It took 2 more days to analyze the data. I identified a complex network for moving merchandise through shell companies. Artemis Transport, a courier service moving women between locations within the country. New Life Consulting, providing fake documents and cover stories for international transport. Global Arts Foundation, a non-profit organization laundering money. They all appeared to be legitimate businesses with perfect reputations. Many sponsored charity events. The hypocrisy made me sick. But the most shocking discovery was the client list. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, people whose faces appeared on magazine covers and TV screens. People who publicly fought against human trafficking while privately being its main customers. The system was so vast, so deeply embedded in power structures that destroying it through normal means seemed impossible. I understood why Vanessa and Victor operated so confidently. They were protected by the very system meant to stop them. But every system has weaknesses, and I intended to find them. 3. The dark side of art. While tracking the transporters, I noticed that every 2 weeks, vehicles would head to an isolated mansion 30 miles outside the city. The property sat on a hill surrounded by dense forest, with only one access road. The perfect place to hide activities from public view. I rented an SUV with tinted windows and did preliminary reconnaissance. The mansion looked like a luxury country estate, but its security was more extensive than many military installations. Thermal cameras, motion sensors, armed guards patrolling every 30 minutes, biometric locks on all doors. Direct infiltration would be suicide, but I didn't need to get inside, not yet. I just needed to understand what happened there. I found an ideal observation point on a neighboring hill, an abandoned hunting cabin with clear line of sight to the mansion. Using a parabolic microphone and thermal imaging binoculars, I could see and hear enough to get a picture of their operations. After 3 nights of continuous observation, I began to understand the rhythm of the place. On Fridays, near midnight, activity would increase. Expensive cars with dark windows would arrive one after another. Guests entered through a back entrance, never identifying themselves to security. A specific knock pattern, 3 short, 2 long, served as a password. On my 3rd night watching, I witnessed an event. The parabolic microphone picked up fragments of what happened inside, sounds that chilled my blood. Classical music interrupted by screams of pain, applause, the sound of an auction hammer, more music, more screams. This wasn't just a place where people were sold. It was a theater of horrors where pain and humiliation became entertainment for twisted minds. Young, beautiful women far from home were living a nightmare. When dawn came, I returned to the city and researched the mansion's owner. There was no direct information. The property belonged to a company called Vita Artis LLC, registered in the Cayman Islands. It took 2 days of hacking to trace the ownership chain and identify the true owner. It was Judge Robert Chambers, a Supreme Court justice known for his harsh sentences against sex offenders, a public crusader for morality, a perfect example of a wolf in sheep's clothing. I continued my surveillance, focusing on technical details. I managed to hack into one of their security cameras in the courtyard. It provided limited visibility, but enough to see part of what happened inside through the large windows of the main hall. What I saw was staged like avant-garde performance art. On a raised platform stood a young woman, nearly naked, with a strange metal device attached to her body. A masked man slowly adjusted screws on the device, causing the woman to flinch in pain. All this happened to piano music played by another woman with an empty, distant expression. Around this scene sat audience members in formal evening wear and masks. They sipped champagne and politely applauded each adjustment of the device. In the corner, operators with professional cameras recorded the performance from different angles. I turned off my monitor, unable to watch anymore. For the first time in my entire military career, I felt physically sick from what I'd witnessed. I'd fought in places where human life meant little, but even there remained some basic understanding of humanity. Here I was seeing pure evil, cold, calculated, disguised as art. And Vanessa was part of it, my wife, the woman I'd lived with for 5 years. I took a drink of whiskey straight from the bottle, breaking my own rule about drinking during an operation. But I needed something to dull the shock, just one drink to clear my head. Then I went back to work. Now I knew what I was facing. This wasn't just human trafficking. It was a cult, a religion for people who turned violence into elite entertainment. And I was going to destroy it. 4. Stopping a kidnapping. After a week of constant surveillance, I noticed a change in Vanessa's routine. She met twice with two men at a cafe across from the courthouse, a location that hadn't appeared in her patterns before. The men looked like professional bodyguards, short haircuts, concealed weapons under their jackets, constantly scanning their surroundings. Their military bearing revealed special training, high-end mercenaries. I placed a directional microphone at a nearby table and recorded their conversation. "She takes the same route home every day," said one man with an Eastern European accent. "Through the park, then past the school grounds. There's a perfect blind spot between security cameras, about 40 seconds with no coverage." Vanessa handed him an envelope. "Half now, half after delivery. The client emphasizes no damage. He wants her in perfect condition." "She's not the first prosecutor's daughter in our inventory," the second bodyguard smirked, "but definitely the youngest." Vanessa frowned. "That's not your concern. Just do the job cleanly. And remember, if she's found, you'll be found too." My blood ran cold. They were planning a kidnapping. I needed to identify the target. After the meeting, I followed the bodyguards. They got into a gray minivan and drove to a residential area in the northern part of the city. They stopped across from a private school with a sign reading, "St. Mary's Academy for Girls." I changed position and used maximum zoom on my binoculars. I saw their target, a teenage girl, around 16, with dark hair and a ponytail, wearing a school uniform. She was chatting with friends, completely unaware of the danger. Back at my operations center, I quickly identified her. Emily Cooper, daughter of District Attorney Michael Cooper, who was leading a major case against an organized crime syndicate. Emily was a key witness. She had accidentally recorded criminals discussing details of their operation during a party. Everything made sense. The kidnapping was planned both as revenge and as a way to derail the investigation. And Vanessa's comment about a client who wants her in perfect condition suggested the girl faced a fate worse than death, becoming part of their twisted collection. I had less than 24 hours to prevent the kidnapping. I could anonymously warn the police, but after discovering Agent Williams' involvement, I didn't know who to trust. Emily needed protection, and I was the only one who could provide it. The next day, I positioned myself in the park through which Emily would walk home, according to the bodyguard's plan. Dressed as a jogger with a baseball cap hiding my face, I blended in while staying ready to act. At 3:45 p.m., I spotted the bodyguards. They parked their minivan at the edge of the school grounds and took positions that gave them perfect control of the girl's route. Professionals who knew their job well. At 4:10 p.m., Emily appeared. She walked alone, listening to music with headphones, a perfect target, distracted and vulnerable. The bodyguards began their approach, moving from opposite directions to cut off escape routes. Their movements were smooth, practiced, people used to operating unnoticed. There was no time for a complex plan. I had to act now. 5. Direct confrontation. I checked the mask in my jacket pocket. A simple black ski mask, nothing special, but enough to hide my identity. I calculated my interception path. If I accelerated now, I could position myself between the bodyguards and Emily at the moment they converged. One bodyguard had already approached the girl, pretending to ask for directions. Classic distraction technique. The second approached from behind, holding a syringe, standard procedure for quiet abductions. I broke into a sprint, instantly shifting from casual jogging to full speed. Skills from years of special operations training allowed me to move quickly but silently, despite the pace. The first bodyguard noticed movement in his peripheral vision, but too late. I was already in perfect position to attack from behind, at an angle that prevented him from drawing his weapon. I used a carotid restraint, a standard technique. Right arm around the neck, applying pressure to the sides of the throat where the carotid arteries are located, not the windpipe. When done correctly, the target loses consciousness in seconds due to restricted blood flow to the brain without permanent harm. The first bodyguard went limp before he could make a sound. I lowered him to the ground and immediately turned to the second threat. This one was better prepared. Seeing his partner neutralized, he dropped the syringe and reached for his concealed pistol. At the same time, he pushed Emily toward the waiting van, where a driver held the door open. I assessed the situation in an instant. Emily was screaming, confused about what was happening. The bodyguard was drawing his weapon. No time for subtlety. I launched forward, using a parked delivery truck as cover from potential gunfire. I had maybe 1 second before he could aim properly. That was enough time to close the distance and deliver a series of strikes to vulnerable areas: liver, solar plexus, throat. The man was well trained, but not at my level. His gun hand went limp after a precise strike to the nerve cluster. His eyes widened in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected to face someone with professional training. We exchanged several more blows. He used Krav Maga techniques. I countered with military combatives. My final strike hit the solar plexus. He doubled over, unable to breathe for crucial seconds. That was enough to end the fight. A few more controlled strikes to key points, and the second bodyguard joined the first in unconsciousness. Emily stood frozen in fear, staring at me with wide eyes. Who are you? What's happening?" "No time to explain," I replied, disguising my voice. "These men were trying to kidnap you. Run straight to the police station, don't stop. Ask specifically for the chief of police, trust no one else, especially not FBI. Tell them it's connected to your father's case." "But how did you?" "Run now." My tone left no room for argument. The girl nodded and ran toward the main street. I made sure she was out of sight, then quickly searched the unconscious men, taking their phones and weapons. As I prepared to leave, the first bodyguard started regaining consciousness. He struggled to focus his eyes, and I realized my mask had slipped. Part of my face was visible. "I'll remember you, soldier," he growled, staring at me. I could have killed him. It would have been simpler, but that's not why I left the military. "Remember well," I replied, pulling my mask back into place. "And tell your bosses, every girl they try to take, I'll be there, every single one." A strike to the jaw sent him back to unconsciousness. I quickly left the area, blending with pedestrians before anyone could call the police. The rescue was successful, but I knew the real battle had just begun. 6. The hunt turns. My secure phone vibrated 40 minutes after the incident. The tracking device I'd placed in Vanessa's phone showed a sudden change in her movements. She had abruptly left a meeting and was heading to Artemis Studio. I activated the interception system on her phone calls. "What do you mean, some military type?" Her voice was cold and sharp, nothing like the tone she used at home. "Are you sure it wasn't just a random Good Samaritan?" A pause, then more tensely, "Professional combat techniques, former special forces, and where's the girl now?" Another pause followed by an angry whisper, "At the police station, protected. Do you understand we can't reach her now? The client will be furious." I switched to the surveillance cameras I'd installed in our house. Vanessa returned an hour later, her movements nervous and abrupt, very different from her usual calculated grace. She went directly to my office and began methodically searching through my papers. She knew the attacker had military training and was checking her suspicions. I felt a chill run down my spine. My cover might be compromised. Even a perfectly executed operation leaves traces that could lead back to me. When I returned home for dinner, I played the role of unsuspecting husband. Vanessa was flawless. She prepared my favorite meal, steak with roasted potatoes, asked about my day, smiled at appropriate moments. But her eyes had a calculating look. She was watching, analyzing my every movement. "Did you see the news?" she asked casually, pouring me a glass of wine. "Some vigilante attacked 2 men near St. Mary's Academy today." "Really?" I made a surprised face. "Anyone killed?" "No, just knocked unconscious and left there. Strange for such a safe neighborhood. The DA's daughter goes to that school." I shrugged. "The city's getting more dangerous. Maybe we should move to the countryside. I've always wanted a house in the woods." "That's cute, honey." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "But you know my work keeps me in the city." After dinner, I went to my workshop, supposedly to work on a restoration project. Actually, I needed to check the situation around Artemis Studio. Remote access to their security cameras showed unusual activity, increased security personnel, arrival of several men with military bearing, clearly professional mercenaries. They were preparing for war. Back at my operations center, I intercepted a phone conversation between Vanessa and Victor. "We showed the attacker's photo to our source," Victor was saying. "He swears the resemblance is nearly perfect. It's exactly who he saw under the mask." "You think it's him?" Vanessa sounded tense. "Too much coincidence, don't you think? Right after the paintings disappear from his workshop, there's a professional attack on our operation." "But how could he know?" I was extremely careful. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that if it is him, we can use this to our advantage." "What do you mean?" "A special forces operator in our collection, that's unique merchandise. Imagine what kind of show we could create. An elite warrior trained to survive anything against our best entertainment specialists. Clients would pay millions to watch him break." A brief pause, then Vanessa laughed coldly. "You always see opportunities where others see problems." "Fine, I'll find out if he knows anything." The conversation ended, but a minute later the system intercepted another call. Vanessa, dialing a number not in my database. "It's me," she said quietly. "We need to prepare a contingency plan. Victor suspects my husband, and who knows, he might decide to eliminate me too. Yes, cards, documents, everything as usual. When it's over, I need a new passport and a one-way ticket." A pause, then almost whispering, "Victor is too dangerous, and my husband, he's just a walking dead man now. He can serve as a distraction for federal agents while I take the money." I ended the recording and leaned back in my chair. The situation was developing faster than I'd anticipated. Vanessa was planning to betray everyone, me and her partners. She intended to use me as bait while she escaped with the profits. I smiled in the darkness. Let her think she controls the situation. Let her believe I'm blind to her trap. This overconfidence would be her fatal mistake. Looking at the wall covered with photos, maps, and diagrams, I felt the familiar tension before an operation. The hunt had begun. But this time, hunter and prey constantly changed roles in a deadly dance of deception. I closed my eyes and recalled the images from the paintings, girls with fear in their eyes, merchandise evaluation, perverted performances. All this had to end. Checkmate in 3 moves, and one of us wouldn't survive. Chapter III, The Gallery Underground. In Special Forces training, they taught us, when your enemy knows you exist, change everything: position, tactics, behavior patterns. Now I was in their crosshairs. Vanessa and Victor suspected me but weren't certain. This gave me a small advantage that I needed to use immediately. One wrong move and the hunter would become the hunted. But sometimes becoming bait is the best way to trap a predator. 1. Finding an ally. As I returned to my operations center that evening, I noticed signs of surveillance. A black SUV that appeared twice along my route. The distance it maintained and its maneuvers revealed a professional, far enough to avoid suspicion, but never losing sight of me. Instead of heading to the storage unit, I performed basic counter-surveillance moves, sharp turns, sudden stops, driving through yellow lights. The follower kept up, meaning my hideout was compromised. I triggered the emergency evacuation protocol, sending an encrypted signal to the automated system in the storage unit. Within 30 minutes, all electronic data would be copied to a secure backup server. Then the hard drives would self-destruct. I'd have to abandon the physical evidence, paintings and documents, too dangerous to return. I needed a new safe house fast. I remembered an abandoned art supply warehouse in the old industrial district. I knew the place. My mother took me there as a child when old Mr. Jenkins, who collected rare pigments, owned it. After his death, the warehouse remained empty, perfect for someone needing to disappear. Taking indirect routes, I made sure no one was following me and entered through a skylight on the roof. Inside smelled of dust, old paint, and linseed oil, scents that brought back memories of watching my mother paint, bent over a canvas with intense concentration. I scanned the area using a tactical flashlight on its lowest setting. Large open space, high ceilings, solid concrete pillars, metal shelves still holding rusting paint cans and solvents. Perfect acoustics for hearing approaching footsteps, multiple exit points through loading docks, fire-resistant construction. I set up a temporary base behind large wooden crates and started planning my next steps. I took out a backup laptop from a waterproof container, established a secure connection, and began checking the surveillance systems I'd installed in our house. A slight noise to my right made me instantly shut down the screen and freeze. The sound didn't repeat, but my instincts screamed danger. Someone else was here. Silently drawing my silence pistol, I moved along the wall, transferring weight carefully with each step, a silent movement technique practiced in jungle operations. Another sound, a faint creak of floorboards, revealed approximately where the intruder was. I rounded the corner quickly, holding my weapon in a proper shooting stance, arms extended, stable position for accuracy. A figure stood in the dark corner of the warehouse. "Don't move," I said quietly, "hands where I can see them." The figure slowly raised their hands. In the dim light filtering through dirty windows, I saw it was a woman, thin, worn-looking but with unnaturally straight posture. In her hand was a makeshift weapon, a broken bottle with jagged edges. "Are you from Artemis?" she asked with surprising calm for someone facing a gun. "Did Victor send you to finish the job?" I didn't lower my weapon but relaxed my grip slightly. "I have nothing to do with Victor Crane. Who are you?" "Someone who won't go back in a cage alive." She shifted her weight subtly, preparing to attack. The movement showed training, not military combat, but some kind of physical discipline. "If you're here to take me, you'd better shoot now. I won't go without a fight." "I'm not here for you." I slowly lowered my gun, showing peaceful intentions. "I'm hiding from the same people you are, it seems." Distrust in her eyes gave way to cautious interest. "Prove it." I thought for a moment, then gestured toward my backpack. "I have something in there that might convince you. I'll move slowly." After receiving a slight nod, I opened my pack and took out one of the photographs, a printout of a cleaned painting showing naked women lined up for inspection. The woman flinched at the image. Her eyes widened, and her hand with the bottle trembled slightly. "Where did you get this?" Her voice became hoarse. "Found it under layers of paint on canvases from Artemis Studio. I'm investigating their operation. They're selling women disguised as art. The woman studied my face intently, as if searching for deception. Then she noticed other photos partially visible in my backpack, and her gaze fixed on Vanessa's image. "You know her?" she asked, nodding toward the photo. "My wife," I replied flatly. "Or I thought she was. For 5 years I've been sleeping next to a monster without knowing it." This statement seemed to break down her defenses. She lowered the bottle and slowly sat on a nearby crate. In the dim light, I noticed scars on her wrists, distinctive marks left by prolonged restraint with handcuffs. "My name is Rachel," she said finally. "Rachel Mason. 2 years ago, I was a concert pianist. Then your wife saw me performing at a small theater and offered a prestigious position at a private studio." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what it's like to play Chopin while someone is being tortured in front of you? I wasn't just a witness. I was part of their sick orchestra. I provided the soundtrack for their nightmares." I holstered my weapon and sat across from her, keeping a respectful distance. I didn't want to crowd her. "How did you escape?" "They underestimated my hands." She raised her palms. Long, pianist's fingers, unusually strong, with calluses on the fingertips. "They thought musicians are weak. But do you know the finger strength needed to play fortissimo on a concert grand? The forearm development required for hours of continuous playing." Rachel demonstrated a quick finger movement resembling a piano scale. "I waited 6 months, studied their security system, memorized guard rotations. Then, during transport to a special event, I used a hairpin to pick the handcuff lock. 16 seconds to open it, 2 seconds to strike the guard's throat." In these words and movements, I recognized a familiar combatant's discipline, not inborn, but developed through survival under extreme conditions. "And you've been hiding since then?" "And collecting information," she nodded. "Tracking network members, recording names, addresses, habits, waiting for the right moment to strike, or to find someone who could strike for me." Our eyes met, and I saw in hers the same cold flame of vengeance burning in mine. "Seems we're hunting the same prey," I said. "It seems so," she smiled slightly for the first time. "Special forces, right?" "Former, now I restore paintings." "Former pianist, former soldier," she shook her head. "We're both repainting our lives, but the original images still show through." 2. Sharing intelligence. By dawn, a cautious trust had formed between us. Rachel didn't tell me everything, nor did I expect her to. Survivors of captivity keep parts of themselves guarded as a protective mechanism, but she shared information that proved invaluable. "Artemis isn't just a human trafficking network," she explained as we arranged my salvaged photos and notes on an improvised evidence wall. "It's a cult. Victor sees himself as some kind of artistic visionary. He doesn't just sell women for sex, that would be too ordinary for his ego. He creates what he calls living installations. Performance art that ends in death," I said grimly, remembering what I'd observed. "Exactly. He has a complex classification system for his materials. Basic slaves are the lowest category, sold in bulk to clients in developing countries. Mid-level are exhibits for private collections of wealthy perverts, and the highest category are installations, those used in his performances." Rachel described the trafficking system with the analytical detachment of a scientist studying a disease. I understood this mechanism, dissociation, a method for handling trauma by mentally separating from it. "Where did you fit in this system?" I asked carefully. "Special category." Her fingers moved unconsciously, mimicking playing on invisible keys. "Orchestra." People with specific talents who create atmosphere for the performances. "Musicians," lighting technicians, makeup artists. We weren't sold but weren't considered human either, more like living tools. We were part of the show. I showed her my findings, decoded client lists, movement maps, recorded phone conversations. She, in turn, explained the organization's internal structure. Victor is the mastermind and public face. Under him are 5 regional directors. Your wife runs recruitment and initial selection. There's also a finance director, security director, logistics director, and client relations director. Standard corporate structure, I noted, like any business. For them, it is business, Rachel shrugged. Complete with accounting, performance reviews, corporate meetings, quarterly reports, annual bonuses for good numbers. I once played piano at one of their meetings. They discussed merchandise spoilage rates and conditioning expenses. They were talking about living people like they were products. Our combined analysis revealed the full picture. An international network with operations in 10 countries, annual revenue in the hundreds of millions, hundreds of victims. The system is protected from all sides, I said, studying the list of corrupted officials. Police, FBI, judges, politicians. Official channels won't work. I know, Rachel nodded. 6 months ago, I tried to contact a reporter investigating missing women cases. A week later, she was found dead from an apparent heroin overdose. Official ruling: suicide due to depression. She had no history of drug use. As we continued comparing information, I noticed an announcement in one of the photos taken near Artemis Studio. A banner for a private art museum. Exclusive closed exhibition Metamorphosis. One night only. By invitation only. Rachel, seeing the photo, turned pale. That's a code. Metamorphosis is their term for a major operation to relocate merchandise and records. It happens once a year when they change their primary location. You're sure? Absolutely. I played at 2 such exhibitions. They gather everything in one place, assets, records, cash, before redistributing to new locations. It's the only time when all leadership and all evidence are in one location. We exchanged glances, understanding what this meant. This was our chance, perhaps our only chance, to strike decisively at the entire organization at once. When is the exhibition? I asked, already considering infiltration options. Rachel pointed to the date on the banner. Day after tomorrow. We have less than 48 hours to prepare. 3. A dangerous plan. We need to understand the building layout, security systems, guard positions. I paced between crates, organizing tasks mentally. Without inside information, we're operating blind. Rachel watched me with a thoughtful expression. Finally, she said quietly, "There is a way to get that information." I stopped, seeing determination in her eyes. "I need to go back to them." What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's suicide. They'll kill you on sight. No, they won't. She shook her head. Victor spent 2 years turning me into his perfect instrument. Do you know how hard it is to find a concert-level pianist willing to play during their 6 shows, who can adjust tempo and mood to match what's happening? Her words carried an icy calmness that was truly disturbing. I'll tell them I was too scared after escaping, that the outside world was worse than captivity, that I want back into the structured environment. She said this so convincingly that I almost believed her myself. Victor values my talent. He's more likely to believe I broke and returned than to kill me without getting one last performance. I shook my head. Too risky. Even if they don't kill you immediately, they'll torture you to find out who you contacted, where you've been hiding. Of course they will, she agreed with unsettling composure. But not right away. First, they'll want to verify my story about returning voluntarily. They'll need my music for the exhibition. Metamorphosis is always a grand spectacle, their yearly showcase of new techniques for VIP clients. Even if they believe you, they'll watch you constantly. How will you pass information? During exhibition preparations, I'll have access to the building layout. I'll see guard positions, security systems, maybe even transport documents. I'll memorize everything. A musician's memory is trained to remember entire concertos from a single reading. I could see she was determined. but sending her back to those monsters seemed unacceptable. There must be another way. There is no other way, she stood, and I noticed a change in her posture. Steely resolve appeared. This is my choice, David. For the first time in years, I can decide my own fate. Don't take that right from me. Her words resonated with something deep inside me. I remembered my own thoughts after returning from captivity in Afghanistan. How crucial it was to regain control, even if it meant taking risks. All right, I conceded, but we need to plan every detail. Communication signals, escape routes, extraction plan. The next hours we spent developing the operation with military precision. I insisted on additional safety measures. Here's a mini smoke device. I showed her a mechanism disguised as a cufflink for formal piano performance. When activated, it produces dense white smoke with no smell, non-toxic but creates thick cover. Use it only in extreme situations if you're discovered or in immediate danger. And you, she asked, attaching the device to her sleeve. When you activate it, I'll have 30 seconds to begin action. I'll be near the museum, ready to enter on your signal. We rehearsed scenarios, discussed contingencies, developed backup plans. But we both knew that once Rachel entered Artemis' studio, she would be alone among killers and traffickers. When preparations were complete, an awkward silence fell between us. The upcoming operation could be our last, and we both recognized this reality. Why are you doing this? I asked. You could disappear, start over somewhere far away. Rachel was quiet for a long time, then said softly, when I was captive, they gave me sedatives to keep me compliant. Once they overdosed me and I experienced clinical death. Do you know what I saw in those 40 seconds while they revived me? I shook my head. Nothing, absolute nothingness. Her voice became distant. And I realized that gods, if they exist, have abandoned us. There is no cosmic justice, no universal balance. There's only what we do here and now. She looked directly into my eyes. I'm not doing this for justice. I'm doing it because if we don't stop them, they'll continue. And every girl they capture after I walk away will be on my conscience. I understood completely. That same feeling haunted me after military operations where we couldn't save everyone. I trust you more than anyone in the past 3 years, she added quietly. This wasn't sentimentality, but a simple statement of fact, and perhaps the highest form of trust, someone who has endured what she could express. 4. Return to captivity. The next morning we put our plan into action. I watched from a distance as Rachel approached Artemis' studio. Her appearance was carefully planned. Clothes slightly wrinkled but not dirty, hair unkempt but not neglected, her expression showing tired resignation. The image of someone who had fought but surrendered. Security at the entrance tensed when they saw her. One immediately reached for his weapon, the other grabbed his radio. Rachel slowly raised her hands to show she wasn't a threat and said something. Through my directional microphone, I caught a fragment. Tell Mr. Crane his pianist has returned to complete the composition. They led her inside. I remained at my observation post, nervously monitoring the receiver tuned to the transmitter in the smoke device. If Rachel activated it immediately, it would mean the operation had failed, and I would need to improvise a rescue. 1 hour passed in tense waiting, then another. No signals, neither emergency nor reassuring. At the beginning of the 3rd hour, my secure phone vibrated. A message came through the encrypted channel we'd established in case Rachel gained access to a computer or phone. Initial questioning complete. Meeting with V in 20 minutes. Cameras in every corner, guards armed with Glock pistols, shift changes every 4 hours. So they hadn't killed her immediately, but no indication whether Victor believed her story. After 2 more hours of anxious waiting, the phone activated again. V accepted me back. Conditions: physical relationship with him, complete submission, constant monitoring until exhibition. Metamorphosis preparations underway. V calls it his masterpiece. I felt a wave of relief but quickly suppressed it. We'd only overcome the first obstacle. Rachel was inside, but forced to endure abuse from that monster and still in extreme danger. Over the next few hours, messages arrived in short, coded fragments. Museum, 3-story building with basement. Main exhibition on first floor, VIP rooms on second, offices on third. Basement divided into storage and technical areas. Security, 24 personnel, rotating positions, radio check-ins every 15 minutes. Armed with semi-automatic weapons, sniper on neighboring building roof. Biometric access to key areas, fingerprint and retina scanners. Backup power generators in case of electrical failure. V planning immediate evacuation after exhibition. Merchandise and documents to be moved in trucks with catering company logos. The information was invaluable but incomplete. Rachel couldn't move freely through the building. Many areas remained unexplored. Finally, a last message arrived that chilled me. Performance scheduled for tomorrow, 9 p.m. V says it will be my final recital. I will be the closing piece of the evening. He plans to end my performance permanently. The message left no room for interpretation. Victor planned to kill Rachel as part of his twisted performance. Perhaps he hadn't completely believed her return story, or more likely, decided her betrayal deserved public punishment transformed into art. I sent a brief confirmation that I understood and began intense preparation. I had less than 24 hours to develop an infiltration plan, rescue Rachel, and gather evidence against the organization. Time was running out, but now I had a clearer purpose than ever. Not just to destroy the criminal network, but to save the woman who had risked everything to help me in this mission. 5. Preparing for the gala. I spent the day before the operation in methodical preparation. First, I conducted reconnaissance around the museum, a 3-story modernist building with a glass and concrete facade. I walked the perimeter, noting surveillance camera positions, motion sensors, entry and exit points. According to Rachel's information, the main entrance would have special scanners. The organizers wanted to prevent guests from bringing weapons or recording devices. The rear entrance was controlled by security with biometric identification. But on the western side of the building, I discovered a technical area, a ventilation shaft under renovation. Workers were finishing installation of a new air conditioning system for the upcoming exhibition, a perfect infiltration point. I took several photos from different angles, then withdrew and observed the security shift change. Every 4 hours, exactly as Rachel had reported. Professional discipline, but also a weakness. Predictability creates vulnerability. Back at the warehouse, I prepared my equipment. Nothing excessive, only essential items to maintain mobility. Pistol with silencer, a Sig Sauer P226 with tactical suppressor minimizing flash and sound. 2 spare magazines. 3 combat knives, primary on thigh, backup in boot, third horizontally on lower back. Set of lockpicks and electronic bypass tools for security systems. Light body armor under clothing, not enough to stop a direct hit, but would reduce impact and protect against fragments. 4 flashbang grenades with minimal blast radius for creating diversions. Tactical flashlight with infrared mode and night vision goggles. I concealed everything under my clothing. Black cargo pants with multiple hidden pockets, dark shirt, and leather jacket loose enough to hide weapons but not bulky enough to restrict movement. Toward evening, I noticed unusual activity at the museum, arrival of luxury vehicles with foreign license plates, increased security, unloading of equipment in special cases. Clients were arriving for the exhibition, along with technicians for the performance. My communication device activated again, The final message from Rachel. They're preparing me for performance. Security tripled. External doors secured with biometric locks. Victor has declared this his magnum opus. Most of the collection will be moved immediately after event. Then, after a pause, another brief message. If this fails, know this was my choice, and it was worth it. I must go to him again now. These words stirred a strange mixture of anxiety and determination in me. Rachel was taking a deadly risk not because of me, but I felt responsible for her. She had become more than just an ally in this mission, someone important, a person who understood the part of me that remained hidden from others. Among the arriving vehicles, I spotted one I recognized, Vanessa's gray Mercedes. She looked tense, constantly looking around, checking her phone. Her movements were nervous, abrupt, unlike her usual calculated grace. I remembered her last intercepted phone call. When it's over, I need a new passport and a one-way ticket. She was planning escape, possibly tonight, right after the exhibition. The sun began to set, time to move. I placed beacon sensors at emergency exits, tiny devices that would signal if doors opened. I prepared diversion mechanisms, simple devices to create electrical shorts in remote areas of the building. 1 hour before the event, I infiltrated the museum's maintenance areas through a service entrance, using fake technical staff credentials. The guard barely glanced at my ID. All attention was on VIP guests arriving through the main entrance. Hiding among stored equipment, I observed guest arrivals through surveillance cameras I had accessed via tablet. Faces were concealed behind elegant masks, but posture revealed status: politicians, business leaders, celebrities, people whose position placed them above the law, people willing to pay to watch human suffering as entertainment. My attention fixed on a monitor showing the interior of the main exhibition hall. On the stage stood a concert grand piano, surrounded by strange metal structures resembling both sculptures and torture devices. My heart tightened at the thought that in a few hours Rachel would be there at the center of this nightmare. But it was too late to turn back. The plan was in motion, and only death could stop it. 6. Entering the horror show. At exactly 9 p.m., the gala performance began. I positioned myself near the ventilation shaft, waiting for the security shift change. Music from the main hall was muffled, formal classical pieces creating an atmosphere of cultural refinement. The hypocrisy made me sick. People who considered themselves society's elite had gathered to enjoy the suffering of kidnapped women disguised as avant-garde art. At 9:15, when guards were distracted by the arrival of a particularly important guest, I slipped to the ventilation shaft. Using a screwdriver and small pry bar, I removed the access panel and entered. The ventilation system was just large enough for someone of my build. Any careless movement risked making noise that would give me away. Moving through the narrow ventilation maze required intense concentration. Dust, cobwebs, sharp edges of metal joints. I had to move slowly, shifting weight carefully to avoid creating vibrations. At one narrow turn, I felt a surge of claustrophobia. The space constricted so much that my chest barely fit through. A flash of panic, cold sweat, rapid breathing. The memory of being confined in a small cell during captivity in Afghanistan momentarily paralyzed me. Focus, David, breathe, count backward, 10, 9, 8. The PTSD management technique worked, and I continued forward. Through ventilation grills, I could observe the halls below. First hall, a standard contemporary art exhibition, nothing unusual on the surface. Second, more explicit works, but still within public decency. But with each hall, the displays became increasingly disturbing. In the third hall, I saw living exhibits, young women in stylized glass cases, dressed in avant-garde costumes that barely covered their bodies. They stood motionless like mannequins, eyes vacant, movements mechanical. Guests examined them, nodded approvingly, made notes in elegant booklets. It was an auction disguised as an art show. I continued moving, guided by music growing louder. According to the building plans from Rachel, the main exhibition hall should be in the building's center. Finally, I reached a grill opening into a technical passage behind the main hall stage. I carefully unscrewed the fasteners and slipped out. Here were automated systems controlling lighting and sound, no staff present, everything set to pre-programmed sequences. From behind heavy velvet curtains, I could see the stage and part of the hall. The luxurious space was designed as a combination art gallery and theater. In the center stood a concert grand piano, surrounded by strange metal constructions resembling both sculptures and torture instruments. Spectators in formal evening wear and masks sat in a semicircle on leather chairs. Champagne, quiet conversation, perfect etiquette, as if at an opera premiere. At that moment, Victor Crane stepped onto the stage, a tall, silver-haired man in an impeccable suit. His movements were precise, aristocratic. He raised his hand for silence and began speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to celebrate the true essence of art, the moment when beauty and pain become indistinguishable. His voice sounded melodious, hypnotic. The audience listened with respectful attention. Our final performance tonight, a special gift for connoisseurs. The return of the prodigal daughter, if you will, he smiled at his own joke. A talent who fled but returned to our community. An artist who tried to deny her destiny but realized that true art demands complete sacrifice. A gesture of his hand, and Rachel was led onto the stage. She wore a long black dress, her hair arranged severely. The paleness of her face emphasized dark circles under her eyes, but she carried herself with dignity. Her hands trembled slightly as she took her place at the piano. Our pianist will perform Chopin's revolutionary etude tonight, Victor continued. A piece written in anger and despair, perfectly suited for what follows. For after the music, the real performance begins, the final performance of our dear Rachel. Her swan song, if you will. A soft laugh rippled through the hall. The audience understood his meaning. This would not be just a concert. It would be an execution, transformed into art. Rachel began to play. The first chords of the revolutionary etude filled the hall, powerful, passionate, filled with the rage Chopin had infused into this music. Her fingers moved across the keys with incredible speed and precision, drawing from the instrument sounds that seemed to embody all the world's pain and anger. I watched her, hardly breathing. Rachel had given herself completely to the music, eyes closed, body swaying slightly in rhythm. But beneath this surrender, I noticed an almost imperceptible movement of her left hand. She subtly touched the cufflink on her sleeve. A few seconds later, smoke began rising from under the piano lid, first a thin stream, then increasingly dense. The audience initially thought it was part of the show, a theatrical effect to enhance drama. Victor frowned, clearly not expecting this element. He stepped toward the stage, but at that moment the smoke became so thick it filled most of the hall. Panic erupted, guests jumped from seats, some rushed toward exits. Security tried to restore order. Amid the chaos, I heard Victor's voice cutting through the noise. This is part of the performance. Art should provoke discomfort. But it was too late. The smoke screen had created perfect cover. I kicked out the grill and silently descended into the side passage. The operation had begun. Chapter IV, The Final Canvas. Smoke, chaos, Chopin's music suddenly cut off. This is how my final battle began. For 5 years I had tried to escape violence, sought redemption in restoring damaged art. Now I was returning to what I knew best, destruction. But this time the goal was different, not following orders but saving innocent lives. And among them, a woman whose music, even in a moment of extreme danger, sounded like the perfect introduction to a symphony of justice. 1. Chaos within chaos. The smoke spread through the hall with surprising speed, creating strange ghostly shapes in the spotlights. Guests rushed about in panic, some trying to maintain dignity, others pushing toward exits. Victor, realizing he was losing control of the situation, shouted above the noise. "This is part of the performance. Art should provoke strong emotion. Security to your positions." I used the first moments of confusion to neutralize two guards in the service corridor. Their attention was fixed on the hall events, allowing me to approach from behind. A quick strike to the base of the skull for the first, a choke hold for the second, quiet, efficient, non-lethal. Taking their weapons and communication devices, I gained access to security communications. All posts, activate Eclipse protocol, lock down perimeter. Team Alpha to main hall, Team Beta protect VIP guests, Team Gamma secure merchandise evacuation through Tunnel B. Now I knew their plans. I remotely activated previously planted devices. A series of short circuits in different parts of the building caused security to divert personnel to check these disturbances. Through my earpiece, I heard growing confusion in their communications. Post 3, electrical fire in East Wing. Post 7, surveillance system failure in Sector C. All posts, possible intrusion. Repeat, possible intrusion. Maintain positions, rapid response team deploying. The security forces split up, giving me an opportunity to enter the secure area where exhibits were kept, young women locked in stylized cages, waiting to be sold after the performance. First cage, a girl maybe 20, restrained with decorative but functional silver handcuffs. Eastern European accent, eyes wide with fear. "Are you police?" she whispered as I broke the lock. "No, but I'm here to get you out. Can you walk?" She nodded. I freed 4 more women from nearby cages, briefly explained the escape route. Third corridor right, then down the stairs. The door is unlocked. Go outside and run directly to the police station on Main Street. Don't stop, don't separate. The oldest girl with a determined expression took charge. "We'll help the others. How many more cages?" "I don't know exactly. Be careful. Guards are armed and nervous." Leaving them to rescue others, I moved deeper into the building. I soon encountered serious resistance. 2 members of the elite security team, in black tactical gear with professional weapons. They spotted me simultaneously, no chance to use surprise. I had to improvise. In the abstract art gallery where we met stood a massive marble sculpture. I used it as cover from initial gunfire, then as leverage to topple the heavy piece toward one of the attackers. He managed to dodge but lost his balance. That was enough time for me to close distance. In close quarters, their firearms' advantage diminished. I seized a gun hand, twisted the wrist until it cracked, simultaneously using momentum for a headbutt. The guard collapsed. The second was more experienced, maintaining distance. The gallery became an unusual battlefield. I moved between installations, using a heavy picture frame to block attacks when he switched to a tactical knife. The final moment of this fight, an overturned glass display case created a barrier of sharp fragments through which the guard tried to rush. Fatal mistake. One wrong move, foot slipping on polished floor, and his own momentum drove him onto a large shard. Fatal wound. I continued forward, past exhibitions combining legitimate art with images of torture, past recording equipment documenting performances for sale in private networks. I methodically disabled cameras, removed hard drives, both evidence and blackmail material against high-profile clients. The emergency system announced evacuation, but many guests were trapped by activated security protocols. Perfect irony. Those who came to enjoy others' suffering now experienced fear themselves. Moving toward the central hall, I searched for Rachel. After activating the smoke device, she had disappeared from stage. She might have tried to escape independently, but instinct told me she wouldn't leave until finishing what she started. I shared that conviction. 2. Vanessa makes her move. Making my way through exhibition halls, I stopped at a security monitoring room. Screens showed various parts of the building, and on one I spotted Vanessa, moving quickly through service areas toward the basement. Not the panicked flight of a frightened woman, but purposeful movement of someone with a plan. Of course it's him. Who else could create such chaos? Military training is obvious. She glanced around as if sensing she was being watched. I need to reach the vault. All documents, records, cash, everything's there. I instantly understood her intentions. She wasn't planning to help her colleagues. She intended to flee with valuable assets while everyone was distracted by security problems. Classic rat behavior, abandoning the sinking ship first, with maximum plunder. I quickly determined the basement vault location using information from Rachel. 2 levels down, through administration areas, past technical rooms. According to intel, it contained not only documents but also highest category merchandise, the most valuable captives reserved for special clients. My decision formed instantly: allow Vanessa to reach the vault first. Let her gather evidence and prepare it for transport. I would intercept her there, gaining access to everything at once. Strategically sound. As I made my way down, security continued reporting my diversions. The earpiece captured from a guard reported, "All posts, intruder identified in East Wing, probable military background, armed and dangerous, shoot on sight. Repeat, shoot on sight." They knew about me, but couldn't pinpoint my location due to disabled surveillance systems. The advantage remained mine. Using a service elevator, I descended to technical areas. It was quieter here. Emergency protocols had isolated this section from the rest of the building to protect valuable assets. On a security monitor, I watched Vanessa methodically collecting materials in the basement vault. She worked with cold efficiency, sorting documents, selecting hard drives with recordings, packing cash stacks into a tamper-proof case. A professional who had prepared for this moment for months. Then something unexpected. She took out a canister of chemical solution and began pouring it over remaining documents, destroying evidence. Vanessa wasn't just escaping with money. She was eliminating anything that could link her to the organization after its collapse. I quickened my pace, realizing valuable evidence might be lost. Approaching the vault, I noticed movement in a parallel corridor. Rachel. She too was heading there, apparently with the same purpose: accessing evidence. Our eyes met through a glass partition. A moment of recognition, a nod, silent confirmation of purpose. We entered from different sides, surrounding the vault. Vanessa, focused on destroying documents, didn't notice Rachel at the far entrance. But she heard my steps and spun around, drawing a pistol from under her jacket. "David," her voice sounded surprisingly calm. "I should have known, always too righteous for your own good." "Hello, Vanessa." I kept my hands where she could see them but remained ready to act. "Or should I call you Elizabeth Winters?" Her eyes narrowed. "So you know how long?" "Since those paintings. The ones stolen from my workshop. Interesting technique, by the way, painting over existing works. Much like your life with me, a false layer covering the real person." She allowed herself a short laugh. "Don't pretend you're hurt. We both know our marriage was a convenient arrangement. You got the appearance of normality, I got cover." Normality. Now it was my turn to laugh bitterly. "I genuinely hope to start a new life, Vanessa, a real one, but it's impossible to build something authentic with a ghost." My glance briefly shifted past her shoulder. Rachel was silently approaching, using shelves as cover. I needed to hold Vanessa's attention. "Put down the case, Vanessa," I said. "No one should leave with that evidence. Too many lives have been destroyed by this operation." "And then what?" She gripped the pistol tighter. "You'll turn me in. Tell them how your wife trafficked humans for years. You'll be a laughingstock, the elite soldier who noticed nothing for 5 years." At that moment, Vanessa sensed movement behind her. Rachel had come too close. Lightning-fast reaction, immediate turn, and Vanessa grabbed Rachel, pressing a scalpel from a nearby table to her throat. "What a touching pair," she hissed. "My replacement, escaped property and ex-husband, what a melodrama." The situation dramatically changed. Now Vanessa held Rachel as a human shield, slowly backing toward the emergency exit. "She's coming with me," Vanessa snapped. "Follow us and you'll get her with a cut throat." For a moment, Rachel's eyes met mine. There was no fear in her gaze, only concentration and determination. With a barely perceptible head movement, she signaled me not to interfere. She had a plan. "Find Vanessa," I slowly lowered my weapon. "Go, but remember, wherever you hide, I'll find you." Vanessa laughed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, David. You think I'm alone. You believe you've destroyed everything. There are structures above this, networks deeper. I'll disappear, and retribution will come from where you least expect." With these words, she continued backing toward the exit, dragging Rachel with her. Three-way confrontation. We were at a standoff when the announcement system suddenly changed message. "Attention all personnel. Phoenix Protocol activated. Repeat, Phoenix Protocol activated. Evacuation time, 15 minutes. Vanessa momentarily became distracted, her eyes widening. "Damn Victor, he activated self-destruct." This was the moment Rachel had been waiting for. Her fingers, with incredible speed and precision, pressed nerve points in Vanessa's arm, movements so fast they appeared blurred. Years of piano technique training had transformed into deadly precision. Vanessa's hand reflexively opened from sudden pain. The scalpel clattered to the floor. This second was enough for me to cross the distance and neutralize Vanessa. Precise solar plexus strike, then restraint hold. "Are you okay?" I asked Rachel, controlling the struggling Vanessa. "I'm fine," she nodded, touching her neck. "But we have a problem. Phoenix isn't just evacuation. They've placed explosives throughout the building. Everything here will be destroyed in—" She checked her watch, 14 minutes. "We need to get the captives out." I secured my grip on Vanessa. "Do you know how many are here?" "Approximately 30 total," Rachel replied. "Most on upper floors in exhibition areas, but some in special containment rooms. We've already freed some." The vault door crashed open. Victor Crane stood in the doorway, elegant even amid catastrophe. Behind him stood 2 guards with automatic weapons. "What drama!" Victor exclaimed with unnatural enthusiasm. "Husband, wife, and lover, classic triangle brought to life. This could have been a magnificent installation. Pity circumstances force us to abbreviate the performance." "Victor, cancel self-destruct," Vanessa said tensely. "We can rebuild everything elsewhere." Victor shook his head, an almost paternal smile appearing. "Dear Vanessa, always so practical, but you don't understand. If I can't preserve my collection, no one gets it." His voice suddenly hardened. "You have 6 minutes to appreciate my greatest work, purification by fire." He took a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. The timer on wall displays changed, showing accelerated countdown. "What have you done?" Vanessa gasped. "Hasten the inevitable," Victor shrugged. "Art demands a dramatic finale." He nodded to the guards, who raised their weapons. I reacted instantly, pushing Vanessa toward them and diving behind a metal cabinet. Rachel darted in the opposite direction, sheltering behind a column. A brief but intense firefight ensued. I used weapons captured earlier, conserving ammunition. Victor retreated into the corridor, leaving guards to handle us. "Rachel," I shouted, reloading, "we're trapped here. We need to evacuate the captives. You know the layout, guide them to the east exit. I'll find any remaining ones and follow." Rachel hesitated momentarily, then nodded and, seizing an opportunity when guards reloaded, darted toward a side exit. Vanessa, using the confusion, also disappeared down a corridor, taking the case of documents. "Let's go," one guard called to the other. "The building's coming down." They retreated, leaving me in relative safety. The timer showed just over 5 minutes. I rushed to upper floors, continuing the search for remaining captives. Most had been freed by the first group of women, but I found several more in isolated rooms, frightened, disoriented. I quickly explained the situation and directed them to the east exit. When the timer showed 3 minutes, I heard Rachel through the communicator. "David, one girl is missing, the youngest, practically a child. She should be in Victor's private room. He called her his final masterpiece." "Where's the room?" I asked, already running. "Third floor, west wing, room with gold door. He keeps his special exhibits there." I changed direction, climbing another level. The building had begun to shake. Initial charges on lower levels had detonated. Smoke filled corridors, making breathing and visibility difficult. At the corridor's end, I saw it, a massive door with gold trim, secured with an electronic lock. Several shots destroyed the mechanism. Inside was a chamber of horrors, Victor's personal gallery, where artworks mingled with torture instruments. In the center stood a transparent capsule of bulletproof glass containing a young girl, perhaps 15. She was unconscious, connected to an IV delivering some substance. I tried breaking the glass with my pistol grip, ineffective. I aimed at the electronic control panel and emptied the magazine into it. The lock clicked. The glass capsule door opened slightly. Disconnecting the IV, I lifted the girl. She was light, almost weightless, with pale skin and bluish lips. I could detect a pulse, weak but stable. The timer showed less than 2 minutes when I began descending toward the east exit. The building was burning in several places, support beams cracking ominously. On the second floor, I encountered Rachel, who had returned searching for me. "Found her," I shouted over the roar of the collapsing building. "She's alive but unconscious. Quickly to the exit." Rachel nodded, but instead of running, pointed to another corridor. "Vanessa went to the basement. She's not alone. Victor and several guards are there. They're trying to save something from the vault." I hesitated. The girl in my arms needed immediate medical attention, but if Vanessa and Victor escaped with evidence, everything was in vain. "Take her out," I decided, transferring the girl to Rachel. "I'll go down for Vanessa and Victor." "No," Rachel's eyes flashed with determination. "We both go. This girl, she's my sister." I stared at her in confusion. "What?" "My younger sister, Emma. Victor used her to blackmail me when I first tried to escape." Her voice trembled. "I thought she was dead long ago. Please, David, we have to get her out together." An internal conflict tore at me, the duty to save an innocent girl versus the need to capture criminals. Rachel resolved it. "Time is critical. Most important is saving innocent lives. Criminals won't disappear completely. I have their names, photos, data. We can find them later." She was right, I nodded. "Okay, let's get out. The east exit should still be clear." We moved down the corridor, carrying the girl between us. The building shook with each step, ceiling sections collapsed around us, smoke grew thicker. Less than 50 meters from the exit, Rachel suddenly stopped. "Wait, I just remembered. There's one more girl, the youngest from the new group. Victor kept her separately. She should be in a room at the end of this corridor." I checked the timer, just over a minute. "No time, Rachel, we won't make it." She transferred her sister to me. "Then you go, I have to try." Not listening to my warnings, she rushed back into the burning building. I swore quietly and, ensuring the girl in my arms was breathing, carefully placed her right by the exit where rescuers would definitely find her. Then I raced after Rachel, realizing I had fallen in love with this incredibly brave woman. For the final performance, I caught up with Rachel at the basement vault doors. The smoke was thinner here, ventilation systems still functioned on lower levels. Walls trembled from explosions above, but the main structure held. In the vault, we discovered an unexpected scene. Vanessa, Victor, and a bodyguard intense confrontation. Vanessa was destroying hard drives containing evidence, the same ones Victor apparently wanted to preserve as his legacy. "You're a fool, Vanessa," Victor hissed. "My collection is priceless. Even if the building falls, digital records can be recovered. Art must survive." "Your art is my prison," Vanessa retorted, continuing to methodically smash drives. "If these recordings reach authorities, we'll be hunted forever." They were so absorbed in conflict, they didn't immediately notice us. The bodyguard reacted first. Professional reflex made him turn and raise his weapon. I pushed Rachel behind a column and simultaneously threw a knife from wrist sheath. The blade embedded precisely in the bodyguard's shoulder, not fatal, but enough to make him drop his pistol. Victor and Vanessa turned at the noise. Their faces showed different emotions. Victor, aristocratic disappointment, as if interrupted during an important lecture. Vanessa, cold fury. A tense four-way standoff began in a room rapidly filling with smoke. Each pursued different goals. I wanted to save Rachel and secure evidence. Rachel sought the missing girl. Vanessa aimed to destroy incriminating materials and escape. Victor tried to preserve his perverted legacy. "Where is she?" Rachel demanded, addressing Victor. "The girl from the new group. Where have you hidden her?" "Ah, you mean Lily," Victor smiled with unsettling pleasure. "I'm afraid you're too late. She's become part of my final masterpiece, a performance unfolding now." "What do you mean?" Claire stepped forward, hands clenched. "This building is my greatest canvas," Victor spread his arms, "and everything in it my paint. Lily, like other exhibits, remains locked on the upper floors. Consider it my final statement. When the building collapses, they'll become part of the ruins, transform into legend. They'll be discussed for decades." With a furious cry, Rachel lunged at Victor, but Vanessa intercepted her, throwing her against shelves. In the struggle, they accidentally broke a display case containing antique musical instruments. Strings and components scattered across the floor. I tried to intervene, but the bodyguard, despite his wound, blocked my path. He was well trained, but injury and blood loss slowed his movements. After a brief intense fight, I neutralized him with a chokehold. When I turned around, the situation had changed dramatically. Vanessa had wounded Rachel, a long cut along her ribs, but Rachel, despite pain, maintained extraordinary focus. Her gaze fell on musical instruments scattered on the floor. Understanding flashed in her eyes. With agility any special operator would envy, she grabbed strings from broken instruments. What happened next resembled a macabre symphony of vengeance. Rachel, a professional pianist with fingers trained through years of rigorous practice, transformed musical strings into deadly weapons. She wrapped a steel cello string around Victor's neck with lightning speed. Her movements were precise, measured, as if performing an especially complex musical piece. Victor choked, his elegance instantly vanishing, replaced by animal panic. Vanessa tried to intervene, but Rachel, in an almost supernatural burst of rage and skill, used silver violin strings as whips, slicing through air with terrifying precision. One swift motion, and a string cut Vanessa's wrist, severing an artery. Vanessa froze with shocked expression, disbelieving that a fragile pianist had mortally wounded her. "This is for all the girls you sold," whispered Rachel, making another deadly strike. I stood motionless, unable to intervene, shocked by this transformation. Rachel, a woman who created beauty through music, now delivered death with the same virtuosity she once applied to Chopin. Vanessa, bleeding heavily, looked at me. In her gaze was no plea for help, only cold understanding of irreversibility. "You always said I didn't understand art enough," I said, watching her final moments. "Now you've become part of the exhibition yourself." The building shuddered from a particularly powerful explosion. Plaster rained from the ceiling, A support column cracked. "We need to leave," I shouted, supporting the wounded Rachel. "Everything's about to collapse." "Lily," she gasped, clinging to me with bloodied hands. "We must find her." "Victor was lying," I said, quickly scanning the room. "Look." In the far corner of the vault, I noticed a small door disguised as part of the wall. Next to it on the floor lay an ID card with a young girl's photograph, apparently dropped by Victor during the struggle. I broke down the door with one kick. Inside was a tiny room with a single cot where lay a girl no older than 16. She was unconscious but breathing. "She's alive." Rachel touched her face with trembling fingers. "Thank God she's alive." I lifted Lily in my arms. "Now let's go. We have less than a minute." We moved toward the exit, making our way through crumbling galleries. Fire-consumed paintings that had concealed evidence of countless crimes. The path was difficult, collapsed structures blocked corridors, smoke impeded breathing and visibility. Rachel, despite her wound, moved with the determination of someone for whom death held no fear. She had passed through her own hell and emerged transformed, hardened, unstoppable. We escaped literally seconds before the main roof section collapsed, creating a fiery tomb for criminals forever buried under the rubble of their perverted temple of art. 5 escaped from hell. Outside was chaos. Fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, crowds of onlookers held at a safe distance. Rescued women sat in groups wrapped in blankets, giving statements to officers. Rachel and I, carrying Lily, headed to the nearest ambulance. Paramedics immediately took the girl, placed her on a stretcher, connected her to oxygen. "She needs immediate medical attention," I told the medic. "Possible sedative overdose. And my companion also needs help, serious side wound." While medics attended to Lily, I helped Rachel sit on the back seat of another ambulance. Her wound looked serious but not fatal, a deep cut along the ribs, fortunately missing vital organs. "We need to leave," she whispered, wincing as a medic began treating the wound. "Police will ask too many questions." She was right. Despite saving the women, our methods would hardly win approval from law enforcement, especially given my illegal entry and weapons use. "First you need treatment," I insisted. "Then we'll decide next steps." At that moment, I noticed a familiar face among police officers, Agent Williams, the same one whose image I'd seen in one of the paintings. He carefully scanned the crowd, clearly looking for someone specific. I turned away, pulling my cap lower. The confusion provided cover dozens of rescued victims, many wounded, general disorder. But this wouldn't last long. Soon systematic questioning would begin, identity verification. "I'll be back in a minute," I told Rachel and the paramedic. "Need to check if anyone else is still inside." This was a lie, but it gave me chance to disappear into the crowd. I headed toward the nearest parked car, an unmarked sedan that I recognized as Williams' vehicle from the FBI badge on the dashboard. Using skills I'd hoped never to need again, I had the engine started without keys in 30 seconds. In another minute, I drove to the back of the ambulance where they were finishing bandaging Rachel. "Get in," I called to the paramedic. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately. The equipment here isn't adequate." The young medic hesitated briefly, then seeing my confident manner and the official-looking vehicle, nodded and helped Rachel into the back seat. "What about Lily?" Rachel asked as we drove away from the scene. "The medics will take care of her," I assured her. "Right now, we need to disappear. Williams is here looking for us." Rachel shuddered. "You think he was really part of it?" "I'm certain. His face was in one of the paintings. He was watching the merchandise inspection. He probably provided federal protection for the whole operation." We reached the main highway, then turned onto back roads, taking a winding route through the suburbs to lose any potential followers. Rachel leaned back in her seat, pale from blood loss but still conscious. "Where are we going?" she asked weakly. "Somewhere safe," I answered. "I have a place prepared for emergencies. There's medicine, food, everything we need." She smiled faintly. "You're always prepared for everything, aren't you?" "Old habits," I shrugged. "Never thought I'd need to use this place because my wife turned out to be trafficking humans and I had to blow up an art museum." We both laughed nervously, a terrible joke, but it helped release tension. After an hour driving increasingly remote roads, we reached a small cabin on the edge of an abandoned vacation community. A place only I knew about, purchased through several intermediaries during my first year back from deployment, when paranoia was my constant companion. I helped Rachel inside and laid her on the couch. Her bandage was soaked with blood, but the bleeding had slowed. From a first aid kit, I took out antibiotics, painkillers, and clean bandages. "Can you change the dressing yourself?" I asked. "Or should I help?" "Help me," she nodded. "My hands won't stop shaking." I carefully removed the old bandage, cleaned the wound with antiseptic, and applied fresh dressing. Throughout the process, Rachel remained silent, occasionally wincing from pain. "Thank you," she said when I finished, "for everything. If you hadn't been there—" "If you hadn't been there," I interrupted, "all those women would still be captives. You risked your life going back into Victor's lair. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do." She shook her head. "It wasn't bravery, it was necessity. I couldn't have done anything else." Our eyes met, and in that moment, a deep understanding passed between us. We had both gone through hell and returned. Both lost parts of ourselves along the way, and somehow, against all odds, we had found each other. "What happens now?" Rachel asked after a long silence. "Now," I considered, "now we need to disappear for a while. Williams and other corrupted officials will be looking for us. But we have evidence." I managed to grab one of the hard drives from the vault. I took a small disk from my pocket that I'd grabbed in our final moments in the burning building. "With this, we can expose the entire network. Not right away, of course. We need to be careful, find journalists we can trust, make copies of the data, distribute them to secure locations." Rachel nodded. "I know someone, a reporter investigating human trafficking cases. She's smart enough to take precautions before publishing." "Good," I said, "but first you need to rest and recover. Then we'll start a new chapter." Rachel smiled weakly and squeezed my hand. "A new chapter. I like the sound of that." 6. Epilogue, 1 year later. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the community center where I was finishing restoration of an old mural. My movements were still methodical, but there was a new gentleness to them that hadn't been there before. The mural restoration was part of a larger project to renovate this building into a shelter and rehabilitation center for trafficking survivors. Rachel and I had established it using funds seized from the criminal network. A fitting repurposing of their money, we thought. The past year had been eventful. The evidence from the hard drive I'd saved caused an international scandal. Dozens of high-ranking officials, businessmen, and even celebrities were implicated. Agent Williams tried to flee the country but was arrested at the airport, one of the few who actually faced justice. Many others used their connections and wealth to escape prosecution. But the most important outcome wasn't bringing criminals to justice. It was the lives saved. Over 100 women were identified from the Artemis Studio records, and many were reunited with their families. Those with nowhere to go found refuge in our center. I set down my brush, hearing familiar sounds from the next room, Rachel finishing a piano lesson. Beethoven's Für Elise filled the building, replacing memories of that other music from that terrible night. I walked to the music room doorway and paused, watching Rachel work with a group of young women. Her fingers moved across the keys, demonstrating a passage, and her students watched attentively, trying to copy her technique. Among them was Lily, the girl we'd rescued at the last moment. Over the past year, she transformed from a terrified teenager into a confident young woman with remarkable musical talent. Rachel's sister Emma was there too, sitting by the window making notes. She was studying psychology, planning to work with trauma survivors. Her recovery had been slower, 2 years of captivity left deep scars, but each day brought more life back to her eyes. When the lesson ended, Rachel noticed me and smiled, openly, without the tension that had lingered for months after our escape from the burning museum. "How's the restoration coming along?" she asked, walking over to me. "Almost finished. Just a few more details and the mural will look like new." "Restoring instead of destroying," she took my hand. "That's what we both needed." I nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. We had both experienced traumas that changed us forever, but rather than letting those wounds define us, we were using them as a foundation to build something new. "Nervous about tonight's concert?" I asked, noticing how she unconsciously flexed her fingers, a habit from her days as a professional pianist. "A little," Rachel admitted. "First public performance since everything, but I'm ready." That evening, about 200 people gathered in the community center's small auditorium, supporters of our cause, representatives from victims' advocacy groups, a few journalists. The concert was a fundraiser, with all proceeds going to support the rehabilitation center. I sat in the front row with my sketchbook. When Rachel appeared on stage in a simple black dress, the room erupted in applause. Many knew her story, not all the details, of course, but enough to understand the significance of the moment. She sat at the piano, paused briefly with her hands above the keys, then began to play. Her new composition was called Liberation, a piece she had been writing throughout the past year. It started with dark, dissonant notes, moved through sections of struggle and pain, and gradually transformed into a free, soaring melody. I sketched as she played, trying to capture not just her appearance but the essence of her music. On my paper emerged not simply a portrait but a visual translation of sounds, lines evolving from dark and jagged to flowing and light, representing the journey from suffering to healing. When the final notes faded, complete silence filled the room. 1 second, 2, 3, then the audience burst into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, many wiping away tears. Rachel took a small bow, then looked directly at me. In her gaze I read everything I needed to know. We had passed through hell and returned. Not unharmed but whole. Not unchanged but authentic. In that moment, I realized that for the first time in many years I felt at home. Not in terms of place, in terms of my soul. As if a long, exhausting journey had finally reached its end. And something new had begun, not without challenges and difficulties, but filled with meaning that we were creating together. One painting at a time, one melody at a time, one day at a time. Transforming pain into beauty, darkness into light. Perhaps this was the true art that we were only now beginning to master. If you enjoyed this story, please support with a like and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you.